I'm gonna go ahead and post this video here. It seems like Google's. I'm having a little difficulty with Google and with YouTube overall because I can't seem to open the other channel like I wanted to, and it's just causing too much difficulties right now. I'll keep making these videos for here, and then once I get that channel going, I will move everything there. But as it seems like that might just actually be an impossibility. But anyways, this topic's mostly on business kind of thing, so it's still relevant to this channel, even though it's still referring to some animation. My point was what's going on with The Simpsons and what I think the Fox show overall do. So if we research sitcoms and stuff on TV, what we always end up with is that sitcoms are very profitable once they end. So the fact that The Simpsons have gone on for this long is just pure amazing. The company could be basically losing lots of money simply by continuing this sitcom in the way they have. By continuing this show, it becomes less valuable with time. And this is the one issue I have with the show. The show has lots of value. It could have kept tons of value, and it would have been, it's still, I think, the most valuable show out there because the franchise is just so huge. Like, we're talking top 4 out of worldwide franchises. The Simpsons is one of those. And it's just insane. Like, the other ones I think are Star Wars, Pokemon, and I can't remember if it was Harry Potter or something similar. The thing is, like, The Simpsons are way up there. And the point with this is that my main gripe with the show is that the quality keeps dropping year after year. And although everyone points to the Lady Gaga episode, Lisa Goes Gaga, as the worst episode of the show, it kind of is because it has no story. I personally don't see it as the worst episode simply because I wasn't expecting anything from it, and they didn't even provide me with anything. So that's my main point with this. My least favorite episode of The Simpsons is still, it's one that I can somewhat get enjoyment out of, but it just always, every time I watch it, always pisses me off, and it's still Battlestar Galactica. That episode for me is the episode that completely destroyed The Simpsons for everything that they were. And they never recovered from then. It's just, I feel the reason that episode even exists is some sort of test by the writers and the crew to see how low they can sink before people will give up on them and not watch the show. And I guess people totally either watched it or loved it or whatever, and so they continue that downward spiral that lives on to this day. Personally, for me, The Simpsons didn't end at that episode. It ended a few episodes before with the motorcycle episode, Please Please My Wife or something. I can't remember the name of it exactly right now. But the problem with that episode was that, first of all, it started with Homer and Marge somewhat dancing in a 50s style diner, and they were like throwing each other, doing crazy moves and throwing each other like through chimneys and stuff. And that by itself was already kind of breaking the laws of physics, and also just completely, you have to completely destroy any suspension of disbelief that you had. And once they did that, the show for me started to break too many rules. Once you break it, the show becomes way more, way less enjoyable than what it used to be. And The Simpsons continued this trend. And specifically in this episode, at the very end, it has the moment, I think, that totally destroyed The Simpsons. And that is when Homer picks up a motorcycle and proceeds to have a sword fight with his rival in the episode for no reason. Like, with 2 bicycles, like, people just having a sword fight. Yeah, it could be funny, especially if you rewatch it nowadays. But I remember the first time I watched that episode, I was so, like, in complete shock. Like, is this really happening? This isn't The Simpsons. Like, it was so terrible when I saw that happen. It totally, for me, signified the point when The Simpsons either jumped the shark or completely lost it. And the reason they lost it from this point on is because they just said, like, there's no need to continue rules. We can be as cartoony as possible. This has huge consequences for the rest of the show. From this point on, for instance, we can't really see anything special in the Halloween specials because the point of the Halloween specials was to do things that you couldn't do on the show. It wasn't just to make horror episodes per se. It is, but that's an element of it. One of the other much better elements was the fact that the writers had complete freedom during this time. Although I must say that the main point was to do horror. But the problem with The Simpsons is that they haven't kept with that. They've added some horror elements to other episodes, and they have also taken elements from the Halloween episodes and put them in other random episodes, like Three Shorts and stuff, with that seem pretty much they could have been a modern day Halloween episode, but it's not because it's on during a regular season episode. And that kind of sucks. And I think it all started with this kind of season 11, when everybody decided, like, for some reason the writers decided, let's break all the rules and forget about it. And what it led to is a show that became much more lazy as time went on. And I mean lazy in the way it was written. And my recent gripe with the last Halloween special was based mostly because it just felt so lazy. Nothing. The first two stories had basically no plot, and then the last one just it aimed to do something that I feel it totally missed the point on. It seemed like they were trying to go for this horror concept, but the second they added the really lame jokes to it, what it became was like something. It felt like there was a huge tragedy episode going on, but for some reason people tried to overlay it with jokes that didn't really work, and it just made the whole episode, for me, in my opinion, look just awful in execution. And because the execution was so flawed in that episode, for me, I feel like it was such a low for the show, because like no. It shows that no one really cared. It felt like no one was putting their energy or effort into trying to make sure that this doesn't come off bad. And it came off, to me personally, bad. And mostly because, like, there's other concepts you have to think about, like in the real world, like how people are going to see this and how people are going to interact with this. And it has a potential to ruin the show overall if enough people do not agree with it. And I can see that a lot of people may actually like it and stuff, but it's still changed. For me personally, it changes the whole personality of the show, the whole concept behind the show, and it breaks more rules. And now we can do more things that are kind of worse. And it goes further than that, but my main point is that for me personally, it felt like a tragedy instead of it being horror. Like, there was nothing in it that resembled horror to me, because it was bringing up issues like Homer going to a psychiatrist because he's eating himself and stuff. It was weird. Like, if it had been more like in previous episodes, like when he's being cooked alive by Kang and Kodos and he's just eating himself in one of the titles, that's not a big deal. That kind of worked okay. But it was the way it was executed in this episode that I feel it just went a little bit too far and because they added the jokes, they just basically messed it up. But enough of this. I already talked about this, so I'm gonna move on. My point of this video is that the way the show's being handled nowadays, the writers are constantly basically destroying the value within the show. And so when you see things like sitcoms like Friends, for instance, which have been off the air for 15 years now, and they're making still like $1 billion each year. It makes you wonder how they're going to sell The Simpsons if they keep making it worse every year, and every year that goes by, and who's gonna watch it? Like, there's already like two different audiences because they changed the tone of the show. There's the modern audience of The Simpsons that does actually like the current show and grew up with it, and there's people like me who love the original few seasons of the show, the first few seasons when the show was really popular in the 90s, and it had a completely different backdrop, like completely different element to the show, and it was just, for me personally, it was wonderful. It's basically all my comedy style is based, or whatever, like when I'm talking to friends and stuff, is all based on that kind of humor. It's not based on the modern Simpsons humor. It's the modern Simpsons. It's enjoyable to watch here and there, especially when the episodes are. They have some story, but they're not like too intense or something, and they're not trying too hard. They tend to be kind of enjoyable to watch, but they're not like, I gotta watch this, if I miss it. Like, I've never missed an episode of The Simpsons, but I missed it maybe the first time it ran, and I didn't care about it anymore. I wasn't going out of my way to watch it like I used to, like, because there's nothing that's beyond fun to the point where it's like I gotta watch this. Like there's other shows that I would prefer to watch at the moment than watch The Simpsons. And The Simpsons used to mean a lot. I mean, they still mean a lot to me because I still buy a bunch. I at least I used to buy a bunch of merchandise for them. I stopped, like I said, because it's kind of embarrassing nowadays. And also because all the artwork on everything Simpsons is more about the modern Simpsons, which I really don't want on my walls or in my collection. So I just don't care too much for it. That said, when it comes to selling this show, though, the main gripe that I have is the way the show's been destroyed. I know people have argued that this show has like continuity issues and other things, but the problem with continuity is that this show was a sitcom, and most sitcoms back in the day used to have a story that started and concluded within the same episode, and it didn't really carry on. And the reason was because it was written by so many different people, and all they did was in the end get a bunch of stories from them, and they would there would be some guy that would just take them all and add them somehow into a season, with none really touching each other in continuity. So like any episode could start the season, and any episode can end it, and any episode can be in between anywhere. And that's how they were just written because of timing, and it worked for The Simpsons because The Simpsons weren't really like the Flintstones before them. There was really no continuity. There was a slight continuity in the background, like people had kids and stuff, and then these characters would be added to the show, and certain things would happen that would be brought back into like another episode. But it doesn't mean that each episode had a continuity the way that say shows like Rick and Morty do. And the reason for this is because the way you used to write them was, again, for a business reason. You wrote a bunch of them and you would put them there. And people seem to have forgotten this, and they constantly want some sort of continuity to exist in the show, or they blame the show for not having some continuity. And I think this is another thing that I wanted to bring up. A lot of people say that the worst, the episode that ruined The Simpsons was the Principal and the Pauper. In that episode, yeah, I get the point. I get the argument. I've seen the YouTube videos. I've seen all that. I get the argument that the episode ruined the character of Seymour Skinner by giving him a different identity, and that kind of makes it question whether any other character can have any other different identity. And personally, I don't think that ruined the show at all. The reason I don't think it ruined the show is because at the end of that episode, the judge in that episode says to all the characters that this never happened by law, and then they're all gonna be like they were threatened to be tortured if they ever spoke about it. And the reason that was added to the episode was to conclude the episode in a way that just never happened. But that whole episode didn't happen, kind of concept. And even though in your mentality that it did, it basically didn't. And the reason it didn't is because this is the way shows were written. Shows didn't necessarily have such a strong continuity. Even to this day, the show kind of tends to act more like Principal Skinner. His mom is his actual mom. Like he was born from her, and they don't tend to touch that concept of that other episode much, if ever. And that was the way the show was basically written. So I don't think that necessarily they corrected that issue at the end of that episode. I don't think the issue that each character can change also really affects the show anyways. The show has had multiple changes of characters within it. Like Barney, for instance, has gone from being an alcoholic to not an alcoholic and back to being an alcoholic. This doesn't really affect, personally, what I think is the main problem with the show. And the main problem with the show for me is the breaking of rules that they needed to set into place, basically rules that destroy suspension of disbelief, and also just lazy writing overall. These two things have affected The Simpsons so much. And there's another thing I could add. It's not just lazy writing. There's also the fact that just lazy overall, like lazy effort on multiple things. And people tend to forget this. Like, personally, the reason I don't like Modern Simpsons is because it turned more into a cartoon than being a show based on reality, taking advantage of the fact that it's a cartoon. And there's sort of different concepts behind this. In a cartoon, like, there's slapstick humor and stuff, and there's certain things that are just they go unexplainable, but not in a good way. It's like people can throw people across rooms and stuff, and it just destroys suspension of disbelief, and that's the really worst part. Being a cartoon that's like that's based in reality that takes advantage of the fact that it's a cartoon. It has certain gags like you'll see like someone complain that cartoons aren't 100% accurate, and then you see Homer sitting in the couch and Homer's outside the window. That joke was great. Like that's awesome. They took advantage of the fact that it's a cartoon, but it didn't necessarily break suspension of disbelief. There was a joke behind this, and there was a point why this was executed this way, and it was done in a way that there was still certain rules in place, like the rules of physics and all this other stuff. Like, and Homer wasn't like just some huge cartoon with no intelligence, and he wasn't like always smiling and stuff. He was more of a real dad, I would say. Even though he became stupider, like everyone, like even the show has said, like he became stupider over the years. That's fine, but the current iteration of Homer is just a completely different character, and I have just problems with that. So when you can see all these things and all these changes, like you can pretty much point to the fact that that I feel that the Simpsons were destroyed during the 11th season. They already were getting bad beforehand, like the show was getting lazier writing, but it was the 11th season, especially on that one episode with the motorcycles. That episode's still a really good episode. But I think the end part of the episode was when all suspension of disbelief was like all rules protecting suspension of disbelief were just thrown out the window. Like that didn't matter anymore. And then the writers decided that they can do whatever they wanted with the show and when they did this, when they broke that main rule, what you get is a show that is incoherent. It can be anything and it's nothing at the same time. It's just pure garbage, and it's whatever the writer wants to write that day, and they can just shove it into the show. And that's just so bad. It's so bad. Like, if I were to write you a show and then I would just do anything, and like it's just pure garbage. Every day is different. There's nothing that sets it in place. There's nothing at all that makes it special. Like, you're gonna see just garbage. Like, personally, one day there's one thing, and then the other day it's completely different, and then it could work if the people cared about it. It could work. Anything could always work as long as someone has some kind of, I don't know, passion, I would say, but also they put some effort into it. And with the shows like The Simpsons, I feel like it's just gotten so, whether it's the culture that writes it or something like that, whether it's politics, everyone has just gotten to the point where it's just a formula that they seem to be following. And I don't get why. I really don't get why. Personally, the show for me completely was destroyed by Battlestar Galactica. That episode, if you watch it today, you will see everything that I'm talking about. Basically, none of that episode follows any rules, and the writers are constantly pointing out that it's the worst episode ever. It even ends with the comic book guy saying worst episode ever. They knew that episode was pure shit. They knew it, and the reason they released it was to see if they could just, in my opinion, the reason they released that is just so they can see how bad they can make the show and how much you'll still watch it, because it's still The Simpsons. And I think this is the main flaw with the show. See, there's no reason to keep these people working there. They're only there, I think, for political reasons. Is they know they're going to keep that job. People like them, so they're not going to get fired. And this is the thing that baffles me. If they are not going to put any effort into making these shows, then why are they even bothering? Because, like, no one puts any effort into making new Friends episodes, but guess what? Everyone's making money on that show still to this day. So the question is this: why didn't they give up already and just get some royalty paychecks once the show goes into syndication? Why? I don't get it. Like, I really don't get it. These people did an excellent job. At least in the beginning, they did a really excellent job, and they should be, rewarded for that. To this day, they put a lot of effort. This was their show for life now. It's been 30 years. And these people have worked basically their whole life. I would say, if not their whole life, most of their life on this show. They could retire already. Like, they don't need to keep doing it, especially if they don't want to be there. They already made enough money, and they're going to continue making enough money. If, in fact, I think they would if they quit now, they would have made as much as they would have made a few years ago doing nothing, completely nothing. and I don't see why they continue to bother because they don't seem like they want to be there. I don't know if Fox is forcing this either because like if Fox is forcing this, they're making a huge mistake because what they should do with this show is that they should, in a way, reboot it or just continue it, but with a completely different cast. And the reason I say they should do that is because, first of all, the original cast and everyone that was there, the writers and stuff, would probably still see royalties. They'll still be paid. They just don't have to do anything, which is like a win for them. And if they want to do other things, they can follow other passions, which seems to be the case with some of the writers or voice actors, at least. We all know Mr. Burns, the voice actor, wanted to quit the show like a year ago just so he can go and pursue other things because he's tired of The Simpsons. Why not let him? Like seriously, why not let him? I don't need his voice in the show because like other people sound the same. They sound better in a sense because like he doesn't even sound as well as like he used to when he first started the show. The voice has changed. People change in age and everything affects them. So my main point is like this constant baffledness that I don't know like why are they working on this show? Like personally, I would find a way to either retire them so I can restructure the show for the modern age, and in a sense reboot it, but not necessarily end it. I mean, because contract wise, it seems like they can't end the show without it all, without them restarting a different show which they don't have rights to. So if that's the case, if this is all because of some sort of like contract where they can't end the show, and the reason they have this special contract is because this when Fox first became a network on TV, one of the first shows they had was The Simpsons. In order to keep The Simpsons and stuff, they gave a lot of rights to the writers and the producers and stuff. So the whole show cannot be, in a sense, changed. And I believe this is why the show continues to this day. It's because it's special in that regards. But I'm not saying like we need to completely reboot it, fire everybody, and just take away their stuff and then like start a new show but for ourselves. They don't need to do that. The show can continue as it currently is, but completely different everybody working on it. And that is okay. Like that's already kind of been done. The only difference is the voice actors are still there. They're still the same voice actors as they've always been, but I think that could also change now. And there's other people as well as like producers and stuff and like the showrunner's been there since the beginning, but he wasn't the showrunner when it first started. All that needs to change, I think. Like everyone that used to work on the show needs to somehow retire and move on now. And I think it's about time, especially at the 30th year. I think that's plenty already. And they should continue the show. Like I know it sounds weird that you can continue the show for like longer than that. But here in Japan, I think there's shows that have been going on for 50, if not 60 years that were animated. And they're still on TV. Like, it still goes on. And I would say they're kind of, decent quality. They for some reason set up some rules on the show. And this is what I recommend that The Simpsons does if it gets rebooted. Is go ahead, put down some rules. I would put in rules where the show can't be as cartoony as it used to be in this current iteration. But that's just my own personal thing. Like I don't know what show people prefer nowadays. Whatever is good with people, it's fine with them. But for me personally, I prefer the old show. So I'm gonna just say this based on my opinion. But I would basically remove all those kind of slapstick humor and all those like cartoony humor things that just don't make any sense and just seem kind of lazy. I wouldn't put rules against all that. The other thing is like I would put a rule where the whole Simpsons are basically in a world, an actual world, not just like Springfield where everyone knows them for some reason. I would still leave them in Springfield. My point is that Springfield in the original show was much bigger. It was like an actual city. It was like there was different people on the streets. Like you wouldn't see ever someone that you recognize right away. Like there wouldn't be like Krusty the Clown walking down the street or shopping in the same supermarket as the Simpsons kind of thing, like you would see nowadays. And then for some reason, you also have like Disco Stew and Apu in the same store because that's everyone that lives in Springfield. That doesn't make any sense. Like I would completely change that concept or put a rule around it at least to make it seem like the world is actually a real world. And then and once this is in place, everything else is fine. Like it's up to the writers what they find funny and stuff like that. But I would try to hire people that were fans of the show, especially fans of the original show at least. Because I think one of the problems with The Simpsons over time was that they hire people that didn't even watch the show. Like they would blatantly say, like, "I've never seen an episode, but I know it's funny, so I'm gonna write for the show." And it's kind of weird that these people got the job for this, but it's obvious because they had connections, they knew who they were working with. So it kind of sucks. Like ruined The Simpsons for me personally. These kinds of management things kind of ruined the show. And again, the producers, whatever, just didn't care. They didn't care. No one cared, and that kind of affects me because like, where it affects them personally because they're gonna get less money if they don't put any effort into understanding what the show's about. They can continue the show for perpetuity and continue making money, but they're doing work. Whereas in the past, they could have just sold the show and made money without having to do any work. Yeah, they can kind of still do it now, but they're depleting. I'm pretty sure they're they're just depleting at the amount that they would actually end up making. So to finish this video, the last topic is basically on the same concept of whether or not the show would continue to be profitable if it continued the way it is. I would say no. If they make another season where it gets to this point where it becomes more and more either more violent or more something else, or it goes down certain routes like this Halloween episode last went down, it's going to add more elements to the show over time, which are worse, and it becomes harder for you to sell the show to more audiences. The main reason people love the show is because it used to give them a good feeling, and I believe somewhere around the 11th season, the 12th season, and stuff like that, there was a certain period when the show was making a lot of people uncomfortable. And when you continue making things uncomfortable like that, you're just going to destroy everything for everybody, and no one wants to watch it, and especially now in syndication. Like they'll back off a bit, and then it just gets worse. Like you don't want to do that with any show, and I believe this is the reason why Seinfeld also ended, is because I think Jerry Seinfeld knew, like, if he continued the show, it was going to become worse. It's going to destroy the audience that used to rewatch it, and no one's going to want to rewatch it. The value of the show would drop. It would just tank. And for some reason, the writers on The Simpsons didn't realize this, and they just kept going with it and making it worse and worse and worse. Whereas nowadays, what I recommend they do is that they reboot this show. They can do wonderful things if they reboot it. They could change the artwork if they feel like it. I don't recommend it unless they're going to revert it back to what it used to be. And wonderful, like there's more animation, there's something else there. Nice. If they do that, that's perfect. But what I recommend and what I want to see with it is that I want to see new life be brought back into the show. The show, for some reason, feels outdated to me. It feels like something that's not even trying. And shows can continue on forever. I'm pretty sure of it. Like, you just look at South Park. South Park, even though it's changed, it's remained good for the most part. Like, some people might not like it, but it has not done the major drastic change to becoming more lazy and worse that The Simpsons has had. I don't know if people will agree with me in this or if I'm crazy, but I just know I've heard people say it too, but the show's changed for the worse. It's not changed for the better in so many ways. And I don't know if the writers or anybody else would ever understand or why, or if they actually believe that it's still a decent show and just people complain, but it's not a decent show. Like, it's not. The last episode that I saw, which I can't remember what it was about, it was something to do with Principal Skinner. It wasn't so bad, but it wasn't as enjoyable like classic Simpsons used to be. Like, there could be a lot more effort into it. Like, and I used to think it was impossible to make decent shows nowadays with some decent humor. But I remember the last show I saw like that was kind of Futurama, and that was from the same kind of people that used to write for The Simpsons, and that was kind of decent. But then also Rick and Morty recently is pretty good with the writing. It's pretty Simpson-esque in a lot of ways, and that makes it really nice to see it. And people actually do latch onto those concepts and to those that style of humor. So The Simpsons can be reverted back to what it used to be. When the 11th season came by and they broke all those rules, especially once I saw Battlestar Galactica, I knew for a fact that The Simpsons, that was the point of no return. I had hope for many years that it would return, but it has never returned. So once that episode aired, that was it. The show was dead. And I'll make a whole video analyzing that in the future. But my whole point is that that one episode, Saddle Sword Galactica, is the episode that destroyed The Simpsons by far. It just shows so well that no one cared after that point. And that is just the most sad thing ever. And there's no value in the show. Like if it continues, it needs to end. And I personally want it to be rebooted. And I don't mean again. I have to end it with this. I don't mean some sort of crazy reboot or some sort of remake or change certain things and stuff. I just mean continue the show, but continue it with completely different cast. So just refresh the show. The best way to say is I want this show to be refreshed. I want everybody that works on it to be not touching the show ever again because they're not doing a good job, and just leave it to the hands of like fans, people that love the show since they were kids in this. Let them write them, and if they suck, replace them until the show gets good again. Like there's people out there that will write you a really good show. It's obvious. Just give them the chance. Make the show great again, and then we can have like something decent to watch. People will tune in if it's decent. Like the show's ratings have been tanking year after year because people are walking away from it. They got too old. The people like me that used to watch it religiously either had kids and then just can't watch it anymore. DVR's been in the way, so people have moved on to other shows to have the same feeling. There's no point. The Simpsons are basically outdated. Now that people are dropping cable and stuff, less people are watching it, even though it's not on cable, but there's no point in it. Like, no one's going to go out of their way. Like, with streaming nowadays, you have to go out of your way to put on The Simpsons and stuff. Like, if you're watching it online or something, if you're some other country, whatever. Like, it's not the same at all for those people to watch The Simpsons like it used to be. Like, each coming year, you're going to see a decrease in viewers. And it's not because they necessarily stop watching. They're just not watching it when it's on because there's nothing to bring them there. No one wants to watch it right away, and that's just what happens when a show like gets worse and worse. There's no attraction to it. You watch it when you watch it because you grew up with it and you know it, and you don't want to see them go. And this is my main issue with them. I don't want to see The Simpsons go. I don't want to see The Simpsons end. I want them to continue, but I just want them to be decent again. I want them to be a good show to watch. In the last few seasons, like they've had so many weird topics. They've touched certain things that I feel like it's obvious that the people running the show are these people living in California with like lots of money, and they have no real sense of anymore of what it is to be just a regular guy. They completely lost it, and it shows in the show. It shows in the topics that they choose to write the show with. It shows with the way they show cultures, politics, whatever. Everything they touch on is seen through this lens, and it ruins the show a lot. It really does. Like it's not the show that people wanted to see. It's not the show that connects with people in the way it used to connect. And this can be fixed again by hiring people that do have that ability to connect with people again. And I'm not trying to, again, I'm going to wrap it up with this. I'm not trying to diss the people that wrote the show. They've done a fantastic job. There's nothing wrong with what they did, and there's nothing wrong with what they're doing right now. And it's not that they lost it or anything. It's just that it's obvious that they kind of don't want to be there anymore. And I don't know who's forcing them and why, because there's no point for them to do this anymore. They can enjoy the show like they've always have without having to work on it. And I think it's time for them to move on. And it would be better for everybody if they got the chance to move on. Now's the time to replace them, because once they all start either dying, moving away from it, or something, you can't replace the voices. They keep killing them off. If the show is refreshed, rebooted, or whatever, we can have all the same characters that the show originally had. We can have back Lionel Hutz. We can have back Edna Krabappel. We can have them all back, because the show is no longer attached to what it used to be. All these characters can be brought back to life, even though I know they were honoring the characters by keeping them dead. They were honoring the voice actors. But when the show's revived, it's another person's chance to take on the role, and it's unfair for them to not be have the chance to do it, even though the character belongs to someone else at one point. It's the same way with any other story in life. Just because we had plays like Shakespeare plays, just because the original most famous person that did it died, doesn't mean we stopped it. We continued it. We revived it. The character can change a little bit to reflect this, but and to not be exactly the same. But it would be nice to see them back again now that we can. And that's the benefit of refreshing or rebooting the show, is that we can the whole Simpsons could be revived. It could be everything could be brought back to life. Everything could be fixed. Everything that was there. Basically, we can make the show alive again. Give it back its energy, the energy that it's missing, the energy that it needs. It'll be such a great moment in like TV history to see this again and then to watch it and to experience it. That I hope that Fox does it, or whoever owns it, especially if Disney buys them in the next coming years. Like they can do this, they can make the show their energy come back again. And I know that's one of the things that Disney wants mostly. Disney wants Fox because I think they're like people have said it's not so much about the Marvel thing. Disney's also trying to get into the Netflix business, the streaming business, and they need shows. And to gain those IPs, to gain things like The Simpsons, especially, you're gonna gain such value that's insane. Like what you can do with that, and they will take advantage of it. But they need, in order to keep that show alive, they really should keep it alive so that it becomes more profitable over time for them. And the only way to do that, I think, again, is the refresh or reboot so that the show gets its energy back. The show's been dying for a long time, and the reason the show's been dying is because people have seen this more as work more and more over the years, and it's time we finished it and we give it back its youthful energy that it used to have in the past, so that it could be great again. It's necessary, and it would be a wonderful thing. That's everything I have to say, guys. I'm passionate about The Simpsons, so this video is going to be extremely long, and I apologize. I know most people aren't going to watch it. In fact, I don't think anyone's going to watch it to the end. So if you did, I'm impressed, to be honest, because I was mostly rambling about the show, and this is the weekend episode for my channel, so I decided to make it longer and to try to grasp most of the business concepts around the show. I know they're not exactly business and more ramblings about random things, but keep in mind that I was trying to do everything based on like what's the value of the show and where has it gone. And that's the main point that I'm trying to point out. Where's the value of this show gone? And personally, like I feel like it's basically decayed because the people that worked on it, like any other job, you just get bored of it over time. You want to do other things. Like it's the case with anything as well, with hobbies and stuff. And it's fine to admit it, and I think they should admit it, and they just should move on. Anyways, that's all I have to say. I hope you have a good weekend. I hope you have a good day, guys. Take care. I'll talk to you again on Monday. Peace out. Bye bye.